Former fitness model Lonnie Willison once appeared on magazine covers and lived a glamorous Hollywood lifestyle while she was married to former Baywatch actor Jeremy Jackson. But after her turbulent marriage with him ended, she reportedly struggled with severe mental illness, addiction, and financial collapse, eventually losing her job, apartment, and car before becoming homeless in Los Angeles. She's since been photographed searching through dumpsters for food and pushing all her belongings in a shopping cart. Wilson has said she deliberately keeps herself dirty and foul-smelling because she believes it makes her less likely to be assaulted while sleeping on the streets. Despite repeated offers of housing, rehab, and financial help from friends, she's consistently refused assistance, saying she prefers to live independently. In 1995, Mr. T was diagnosed with T-cell lymphoma. True to his larger-than-life personality, his first reaction was to joke, "Can you imagine that? Cancer with my name on it. Personalized cancer." After undergoing years of chemotherapy and radiation, he beat the disease and has remained cancer-free ever since. In 1976, a camper near the Gaines Rock Pit in the Florida Keys was approached by a hippie-looking stranger who offered to show him a human skeleton for 25 cents. After seeing the partially decomposed remains, the camper immediately contacted authorities. The victim was eventually identified as 15-year-old Stephanie Sempel, who had disappeared months earlier after hitchhiking to the Florida Keys. Nearly 50 years later, Stephanie's murder still remains unsolved. After accidentally leaving his 6-month-old daughter trapped inside a sweltering car for hours, a Texas father discovered she was unresponsive and, in a desperate attempt to save her, placed her inside a refrigerator to cool her body down before calling 911. Unfortunately, it didn't work, and investigators charged him with manslaughter. In 2012, a woman from New York donated her kidney to save the life of her boss. The boss then fired her when she took too long to recover from the operation. In 2013, 4 members of a Russian family died after entering a poorly ventilated cellar where hundreds of rotting potatoes had released a deadly buildup of gas. One by one, each family member went down to rescue the last and was overcome by the fumes. An 8-year-old girl became the sole survivor after the cellar door was left cracked open, allowing enough of the fumes to disperse before she entered and discovered the bodies of her entire family. In 2010, 19-year-old star rugby player Sam Ballard accepted a dare to eat a garden slug at a party. Unbeknownst to him, the slug was carrying rat lungworm parasites, which triggered a rare infection that left him with severe brain damage and paralysis. Ballard spent the next 8 years requiring around-the-clock care before dying from complications in 2018 at just 28 years old. This man developed star-shaped cataracts after he was zapped by 14,000 volts of electricity. While he got some of his vision back after surgery, he's still legally blind as a result of the mishap. A British Marine had the motto, "You'll never walk alone," tattooed on his leg before part of his leg was amputated in Afghanistan. As a result, some of his tattoo got cut off and now reads, "You'll never walk." A Dutch teenager who was going bungee jumping in Spain died after a horrific misunderstanding. The instructor, who had poor English, said no jump, but she heard it as now jump and jumped straight to her death. This is why commands are never supposed to be given with a no or don't. In 1999, skydiver Joan Murray's parachute malfunctioned mid-air, causing her to fall 14,500 feet to the ground. But miraculously, Joan survived the fall thanks to the fact that she landed directly onto a mound of fire ants. Doctors believe that being stung over 200 times by the ants released a surge of adrenaline that kept her heart beating. In 2010, a 17-year-old Chinese boy sold his kidney on the black market so that he could buy the new iPad. 8 years later, the man's other kidney failed, and now he's bedridden for life. In 1995, 51-year-old Willie King entered a Florida hospital, expecting doctors to amputate his diseased right leg due to severe diabetes. But instead, a cascade of medical errors led surgeons to amputate his healthy left leg. When King woke up, he reportedly yelled, "Doctor, that's the wrong leg." His diseased right leg was later amputated as well, leaving him with both legs gone. The hospital and surgeon later paid him a $1 million settlement. In 2004, Peter Porco was attacked in his sleep with an axe by his son, suffering 16 blows to the head that exposed his brain and shattered his jaw. But somehow he initially survived and appeared completely unaware of the catastrophic condition he was in, calmly getting out of bed and carrying out much of his normal morning routine, using the bathroom, packing his lunch, loading the dishwasher, and writing a check, despite his face being severely mutilated and blood covering much of the house. He eventually collapsed and died near the front door. His son, Christopher Porco, was later convicted of his murder. After his mother died in 2013, Arizona man Jim Stauffer donated her body for scientific research. He later found out that her corpse was sold to the US military for $6,000 and blown up at a bomb testing site. In New Brunswick, Canada in 2013, two young brothers were strangled to death by a 100-pound python while at a sleepover at their friend's house. The snake apparently snuck into the apartment through a vent connected to a pet shop below. Experts claimed it's highly unlikely for a python to just go on a human killing spree, but the boys had gone to a petting zoo earlier in the day, so they may have smelled like food to the snake. The animal was euthanized, and the snake's owner was eventually found not guilty of negligent homicide. After being diagnosed with polio at age 3, Diane Odell spent nearly 60 years encased in an iron lung. She only died when a power outage shut down the machine that had been keeping her alive for decades. John Thompson was home alone when he had both of his arms ripped off in a farming accident, but he still managed to get up and dial 911 with a pencil in his mouth. He miraculously survived and both of his arms were reattached. In 1995, a man named Terry Cottle took his own life in a horrific way. Terry's heart was then donated to Sonny Graham, who ended up marrying the donor's widow. Soon enough, people started to notice that Sonny was taking on some of Terry's traits. He started liking things that he'd never liked before, like beer and hot dogs, which were some of Terry's favorites. A few years later, Sonny would end up taking his own life in the same horrific way as his donor. In the 1980s, 12-year-old Martin Pistorius fell into a coma and remained in a vegetative state for 12 years, or so doctors thought. 2 years into the coma, Martin regained consciousness but was unable to show any sign of it. He was trapped in a lifeless state for nearly a decade while being fully aware of everything going on around him. He said one of the worst parts was when the daycare lady would sit him in front of children and baby shows all day long. He also heard his mother say, "I hope you die," on multiple occasions. Today, Martin is able to speak through a computer and move in a wheelchair, though he'll forever be traumatized by those 12 years of suffering from locked-in syndrome. This was the World Cup goal that would ultimately cost Andres Escobar his life. During Colombia's 1994 World Cup match against the United States, Escobar accidentally deflected a cross into his own net, helping knock Colombia out of the tournament. The loss completely stunned the country, which had entered the World Cup with enormous expectations after a dominant qualifying campaign. Just 10 days after the loss, following a night out in Medellin, Colombia, Escobar was confronted by several men in a parking lot who reportedly mocked him over the own goal before shooting him 6 times. Witnesses later claimed the gunman yelled "goal" after each shot. Investigators believe the killing was linked to powerful criminal figures and gambling syndicates that had lost massive amounts of money on Colombia's elimination. Escobar reportedly tried to defuse the confrontation before the attack, telling the men that, quote, "life doesn't end here." Minutes later, he was dead at just 27 years old. The shooter was quickly identified, convicted, and sentenced to 43 years in prison, but was released after only serving about 11 years, while questions about who truly ordered the killing remain unanswered to this day. Here's some incredible footage of something you never see after a major sporting event. Thousands of fans voluntarily staying behind to clean the stadium. These spectators had just finished watching Japan play, but instead of heading for the exits, many remained in the stands collecting trash and wiping down their sections. The tradition is deeply rooted in Japanese culture, where cleaning shared spaces is often viewed as a basic responsibility and a sign of respect for others. In Japan, many students even help clean their own schools instead of relying on janitors. The result is scenes like this, where entire sections of a packed stadium are left looking almost untouched long after the final whistle. Here's a rare look at one of the most elusive underwater creatures on Earth. Captured more than 5,000 feet beneath the ocean's surface near an offshore oil rig, this giant deep staria jellyfish looks less like a real animal and more like something straight out of a horror movie. Its enormous translucent body and dark ghostly appearance have led many people to compare it to a Dementor from Harry Potter. Unlike most jellyfish, Deep Staria lacks long tentacles and instead uses its massive bell as a living net, wrapping itself around prey in the darkness of the deep sea. Because they inhabit some of the most inaccessible regions of the ocean, sightings are extremely rare, and scientists still know surprisingly little about how these mysterious animals live and reproduce. This was the moment an idiot tried crossing train tracks with his bike just seconds before a train came roaring through. As the crossing lights flashed, he suddenly tripped and fell directly onto the tracks in the path of the oncoming train. But he managed to grab his bike and escape just moments before the train came flying past him. He managed to escape literally a half a second before the several hundred-ton locomotive would have almost certainly turned him into human paste upon impact. Speaking of idiots, this man just narrowly avoided being sliced in half by a circular saw. He was apparently cutting into wall tile when he suddenly slipped, causing him to fall directly on top of it. Somehow, the saw barely missed his stomach and torso, as he even had to lift his shirt to make sure his intestines were still inside his body. This was the moment a family hanging out in their driveway suddenly realized they weren't alone when a massive black bear casually pulled up behind them. Ring camera footage captured the exact second one of the kids spotted the animal and softly yelled "bear" before immediately abandoning the rest of the family to save himself first. Within seconds, everyone ran to the door while the bear continued minding his own business. Although black bears are usually shy and avoid humans, they can become extremely dangerous if cornered, startled, or provoked, especially around food or cubs. This was the moment 21-year-old Maria de Freitas was thrown off a 130-foot bridge without being attached to the safety ropes during a bungee jump in Brazil. Video from the scene shows the cord still lying on the platform after she had already gone over the edge, while onlookers can be heard reacting in horror as the mistake became apparent. The psychology student plunged onto the rocky ground below and was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities later alleged that several operators fled instead of remaining to assist, with reports claiming some even changed their clothes before being tracked down by police. Authorities ultimately concluded that Maria had been launched without a safety connection and eventually arrested the 3 men involved in the operation. The tragedy drew national attention across Brazil and around the world, and many people were shaken to discover that Maria's final Instagram post reportedly included the message, "Life is short, don't waste time." What should have been an exhilarating bungee jump instead became a fatal fall caused by a silly mistake that investigators said was entirely preventable. This koi fish is unsettling thousands of people online because its markings look disturbingly human. The effect is so convincing that many viewers say it triggers the uncanny valley, the same discomfort people feel when something looks almost human but not quite. This fossil is so rare that it only forms in a handful of places on Earth under perfect conditions. This is a coral geode created when an ancient coral colony was slowly replaced by minerals over millions of years while crystals grew inside. The result is one of the rarest and most beautiful fossils ever discovered. For a few minutes each year, the setting sun lines up perfectly with Horsetail Fall in Yosemite, causing the water to glow bright orange and creating the illusion that molten lava is pouring from one of the most famous cliffs in America. Photographers travel from all over the world hoping to witness it, but many leave empty-handed when weather or clouds ruin the effect. When everything finally aligns, the mountain briefly looks like it's erupting. Just a few minutes later, the illusion disappears as quickly as it arrives. In 2024, 24-year-old Clarissa Street died after paramedics reportedly dismissed her as overreacting, despite her repeatedly saying she couldn't breathe and having a long history of dangerous blood clots. At the hospital, a nurse gave her an oxygen mask that wasn't connected to anything, and Clarissa was left deteriorating in a corridor for nearly an hour while suffering from an undiagnosed pulmonary embolism. The inquest later found staff failed to review her medical history, ignored critical warning signs, and treated her for the wrong condition before she suddenly went into cardiac arrest and died. Medical experts later testified she likely would have survived with basic emergency treatment and an earlier diagnosis. Scientists created this eerie ghost heart by stripping a real heart of every living cell, washing away the blood, tissue, and DNA until only a translucent white protein scaffold remained. Researchers can now inject the empty structure with stem cells in hopes of growing a functioning replacement organ that the body may eventually recognize as its own. Horses have almost no muscle below their knees, meaning their lower legs rely heavily on movement to circulate blood. Because of this, their hooves essentially act as second hearts, helping pump blood back up the leg every time they walk. If a horse becomes unable to stand or move after a serious leg injury, blood flow can fail, causing tissue damage and breakdown that can slowly spread upward from the hoof. This is one reason why severe leg injuries is often fatal in horses. In 1979, 6-year-old Ethan Pates disappeared after convincing his parents to let him walk alone to his Manhattan school bus stop for the first time. He never made it onto the bus, and his case became one of the most infamous child disappearances in U.S. history after his photo became the first ever printed on milk cartons nationwide. Ethan's body was never found, but in 2017, former convenience store worker Pedro Hernandez was convicted of kidnapping and murdering him nearly 38 years later. Hernandez confessed to luring Ethan into a basement with the promise of a soda before strangling him. But his defense argued he suffered from severe mental illness and gave a false confession. He was ultimately sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. 11-year-old Kevin Gabor, aka Kevin G, is a young TikToker that was born with osteogenesis imperfecta, aka brittle bone disease, rare genetic disorder that leaves his bones so fragile they can fracture from just minor movements or pressure. Over the course of his life, Kevin has reportedly endured countless broken bones, surgeries, hospitalizations, chronic pain, and severe mobility limitations caused by the disorder. As his videos began gaining attention online, he also became the target of cruel harassment, with trolls mocking his appearance, accusing him of faking his condition, and mass reporting his accounts in attempts to get them banned. Despite the constant physical pain and online bullying, Kevin built a large following on social media through singing videos and clips documenting his daily life while living with the debilitating disorder. You can actually die from eating nothing but rabbit. The meat is so lean that your body can't get enough fat to survive, leading to a condition called rabbit starvation or protein poisoning. Even if you eat large amounts, you'll slowly waste away, suffering nausea, diarrhea, and exhaustion before eventually dying of malnutrition. In April of 1975, Ugandan dictator Idi Amin reportedly gave a speech on the radio praising Adolf Hitler and expressing regret that only 6 million Jews were killed during the Holocaust. Amin also reportedly discussed plans to build a statue of Hitler in Uganda, though the idea was later abandoned after he was informed that Hitler also held racist beliefs towards black people. During an interview shortly before his death, Michael admitted he would often talk to child mannequins just to feel less alone. He would also frequently cry at the sight of kids playing in the park, since it was something Michael would never experience himself. Michael had a meeting scheduled at the top of one of the Twin Towers on 9/11. After talking on the phone with his mom late into the night, he overslept and missed the appointment. Because of that phone call, he later credited his mother with saving his life. Here's a 1985 prediction of what Michael Jackson would look like in the year 2000 versus what he actually ended up looking like. As a result of a combination of skin conditions and body dysmorphia, Jackson went through nearly 100 procedures over 30 years trying to achieve his idea of perfection. In 2003, an entire supermarket was shut down so that Michael could live out his lifelong dream of shopping like an ordinary person. All the other shoppers were either paid actors or his friends, and they paid no attention to Michael. He played around the store like a child and even compared the experience to going to Disneyland. This was the moment a climber completely lost control while descending Mount Risi. On a steep, snow-covered slope, he slipped, dropped his ice axe, and instantly lost his only way of stopping himself. Within seconds, he was tumbling head over heels down a roughly 45-degree incline, sliding and cartwheeling for nearly 600 meters while another climber's headcam captured the entire thing. But miraculously, after the uncontrolled slide finally stopped, he was somehow still conscious. He survived with only bruises and minor pain in his finger, and after being checked by a doctor in the group, he was able to stand up and walk down the mountain himself. This was the horrifying moment an Instagram free climber was forced into a dangerous descent while scaling an electrical tower. With no harness, no clips, and nothing but a strong grip keeping him alive, he was already hundreds of feet above the ground when a massive swarm of bees suddenly surrounded him. As the bees began attacking, he couldn't panic or swat them away without risking his life. Every movement had to stay controlled, since one small shift of weight could have easily sent him falling straight down. But despite the chaos, he maintained his composure, descending level by level, until he finally reached a safe enough height to jump and escape the swarm. In June of 2023, in the North Atlantic Ocean near the Titanic wreck site, Pakistani businessman Shahzada Dawood and his 19-year-old son Sulman were among those killed when the Titan submersible suddenly imploded. Nearly 9 months later, after recovery efforts at extreme depths, small amounts of human remains were returned to the family. Identified through DNA testing, the material was described by Shahzada's wife as the slush that was left delivered in 2 small shoeboxes. Due to the conditions of the implosion and the environment, the remains were limited and heavily fragmented, with some of the recovered material being mixed together, meaning it could not be definitively attributed to one specific individual. In Rochester, New York in 2022, a woman installed a hidden trail cam at her mother's grave after noticing it kept being disturbed. The footage soon captured her father, the woman's ex-husband, returning to the cemetery and urinating directly on the grave multiple times per week. The behavior had been going on for at least several months, and likely closer to a year or more before it was caught on camera. In multiple clips, his partner could be seen waiting nearby in a car while he carried out the act. Police were contacted, but the case fell into a gray area legally, with any charges depending on local cemetery regulation. The situation drew attention for the sustained, deliberate nature of the acts, targeting the grave long after the relationship had ended. Bob Odenkirk collapsed on the set of Better Call Saul in 2021 after suffering a sudden heart attack caused by a buildup of plaque in his arteries that had gone undetected for years. In cases like this, fatty deposits can silently narrow the arteries until one ruptures, triggering a complete blockage that cuts off blood flow to the heart. He was unconscious for several minutes and required immediate CPR and defibrillation to be revived. Without that rapid response, the chances of survival dropped dramatically within minutes. Odenkirk later revealed he had likely been living with the condition for over a decade without even realizing. In 1989 over Iowa, United Airlines Flight 232 lost all hydraulic control after its tail engine catastrophically failed, leaving the pilots with virtually no way to steer. Using only uneven thrust from the remaining engines, the crew managed to guide the aircraft toward a runway and attempt a landing. The plane broke apart on impact, killing 112 of the 296 people on board, but 184 survived in what is widely considered to be one of the most impressive landings in aviation history. Investigators later found that even highly trained pilots failed to replicate the landing in simulators. The disaster became a turning point for aviation safety in the years to come. This is the sunburst appearance of osteosarcoma, the most common form of bone cancer. The pattern forms when the tumor grows so aggressively that it forces new bone to shoot outward in sharp radiating spikes. It's most often seen in teenagers and young adults, typically in long bones like the femur near the knee. As it advances, the cancer can hollow out and weaken the bone from the inside, leading to intense pain, swelling, and sometimes sudden fractures under normal pressure. Even with treatment, it can quickly spread to the lungs, making it a particularly fast-moving and devastating disease. In 1974 in Memphis, R&B singer Al Green was attacked by his girlfriend Mary Woodson after he refused to marry her. As he was getting ready for bed, she poured a pot of boiling grits all over him, leaving him with severe second-degree burns across his torso. He reportedly ran through the house screaming in pain before collapsing. Moments later, Woodson locked herself in another room and turned the gun on herself. Green survived but required extensive recovery, and the incident became one of the most disturbing and defining moments of his life.